We're live.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me this evening. I'm excited to talk about this topic with you because it impacts every school, every teacher, and every student. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and discuss how can we disrupt the cycle or the pipeline from school to prison. What's the role of the teacher? How can we help our students, especially during these challenging times? My name is Dr. Al Moumin. I am your brand ambassador. I'm your communicator, your advocator for using language to help our students and to empower them with tools and resources. That's why I became the brand ambassador with Quarantine Racism. So, what pipeline? Oftentimes, when I talk with people about this particular pipeline, everyone, turn their head around and they say, "What pipeline? What are you talking about?" So, I'd like to start by sharing my personal story. I'm originally from Iraq, and my first day at the elementary school, the first hour, the teacher slapped me on my face. I cannot tell you how impactful that was on my learning capacity and capability. First of all, I didn't understand why she did that. And also, there was like a kind of, if you would say, like an evil look in her eyes, and she was coming at me. I was at the end of the class. And then she immediately slaps me and she said, "Don't write with your evil hand." I have to tell you that during that day, I didn't learn anything. And until I joined Harvard University, my relationship with math was to avoid it at all costs. The teacher referred to my evil hand because I write with my left hand. My mother at the time, who was an educator, intervened on my behalf and she told the teacher, "Don't you ever dare and slap my kid again." So my mom, not the school, stood up for me. These experiences made me understand that discipline, the way we interpret discipline in the traditional sense, oftentimes lead to a negative impact on the learner. And I want us to understand disciplining the learner in a sense of maybe suspending them or expelling them from school. It's as equal as slapping them on the face. So the pipeline I'm talking about is our policies, our practices that impacts our students and push them away from the classroom. Based on research, Black students in particular are impacted more than others from these practices. And I have to tell you, even though the color of my skin is fair, but at the time, I was targeted because in my elementary school, because I looked different. And the reason is because I come from a mixed family. And oftentimes, teachers and educators, perceive the person, the student who looks different with a suspicious lens, if you'd like. So, the purpose of this presentation is to see what options we have other than punitive disciplinary practices. The other hat that I'd like to wear while I'm presenting is my legal hat, if you'd like. My background is in law, and I majored in international law. And the reason I start thinking about the law is these particular practices. I said to myself, there must be another way. There must be some sort of protection available for people to protect themselves, whether it's the school that is trying to impact the way you learn, or whether it is something bigger that is trying to impact the way you think, you perceive the world, then you need some sort of protection. I said earlier that I am originally from Iraq. I lived under Saddam's regime. I lived under the brutality of a regime that was categorized by Human Rights Watch as the regime that had the darkest history in the modern era when it comes to violating human rights. Again, all these concepts intertwine in my mind to see if we can conduct our classes in such a way that is more conducive to learning and more empowering to our students. When I taught here in the US, my objective was not to dictate how my learners learn, but my objective continues to be to provide them with many tools and resources for them to choose which one works best for them to complete their academic journey. And that's why I'm here, part of the quarantine racism, to help you, to support you, to be with you during your academic journey, working with your students as well. And I'm going to also mention the communication of success, the business that I founded to help nonprofits, to help educators conduct their classes, and to help them identify resources that are available to them to cater to their learners. So let's understand this pipeline better, from school to prison. Oftentimes, we think that our learners are safe when they are learning at a school, but the journey does not end when they are at school. Actually, it starts right there. So that pipeline has to do with zero tolerance policies that will embrace arrest, excluding people, suspending people. All of these policies kind of create a pathway, if you would like, to prison. Our job as educator is to help our learners to dig down deep and help them see their potential. And that does not happen if you kind of waving the stick all the way through, if you always threaten them. When I taught at the Defense Language Institute Foreign Language Center here in the United States, even though we were told we have the ultimate authority in the classroom, we were like the drill sergeant of these servicemen and women that are sitting in the classroom, I always created an opportunity for my learners to give me feedback. So I would stop my class like 5 minutes earlier, assure the students that I will, not take it to heart. It will not impact the way I grade their papers. All I wanted is some feedback from them to help them better. You cannot believe how my students responded, how it helped them excel, how it got them to graduate with flying colors. There were other teachers as well who would kind of discipline, who would issue disciplinary counseling if a student even does anything in the classroom that they perceived at the time to be disrespectful or disruptive. Nevertheless, my practice continued to be to provide tools and resources to my learner to, achieve their academic goals. The other thing that I'd like to talk about is that Black students are suspended and expelled at a higher rate 3 to 4 times higher than their white peers. This is not something that, I looked at without exploring some data out there. And the first place I looked at is the Department of Education. And this is a report that they released in 2016. Early removal. The minute you remove that student from the classroom, the minute you put them on their, or it's going to be the first step on their journey to prison. Education is a tool. It's not something that, to be taken for granted. It's a tool that we can use at any time to empower ourselves, to seek jobs, to, put our best foot forward, and get a position. If you deprive a learner from this opportunity, you are kind of putting them on the pathway to crime because they don't have any alternative. I have to share something also from my experience practicing law in Iraq. I represented women seeking divorce and custody of their children. So many of them tolerated domestic violence, tolerated abuse, tolerated, cheating partners because they didn't have an alternative. At the end, so many of them, just lost hope. They lost hope in the world. That impacted how they raised their children, how they interacted with the community. And again, part of it is that they don't have a leg to stand on, which is education. So that's the key tool here. We have to create not one opportunity, but so many opportunities for our learners to behave better in the classroom, to embrace education, to think about the opportunity that they have being at the classroom. Our job is not to seek every single opportunity to get them out of the classroom, but to keep them in the classroom. I also have to be honest with you, not every learner is, waking up with a big smile on their face, ready to go to school. Usually that's not the case. But nevertheless, there are these, you know, um, small action that would make the learner want to come to the classroom, starting from the way you organize your class, all the way from how you talk and communicate with your learner. Um, One way that I engaged my learner and get them to engage with me more and think about learning was using technology and using imagery, realia, bringing item to the classroom. I also want you to picture my classroom. I was at the time teaching Arabic and Arabic culture to soldiers that were coming from Iraq and Afghanistan. They have seen the worst there. And now they are sent to a classroom expected to learn one of the most challenging languages within the Defense Language Institute. So I had to do a lot of, tailoring and reflection, using scenario based learning, be culturally sensitive to their experience, as well as to set the tone of the class. And we will talk about that more within the upcoming slide. So, first of all, we have to see and evaluate the impact. Black students represent 15% of students enrolled in schools. However, 31% of schools, related arrests features Black students. This is something not to be taken lightly. These numbers are for us to reflect upon as educators and see how can we address this issue. We address it by acknowledging its root causes, not the symptoms. The acting up is the symptom, but the root causes, need to be explored. Implicit bias. Implicit bias does exist, whether we know it or not. And believe me, I even, in my career journey, I provided judicial education to our wonderful judges here in the US. And they were brave enough to, enroll in classes exploring implicit bias. It exists because it's a pattern of how we see the world. So oftentimes we tend as a human being to trust those who look like us. That's a given. You feel more comfortable, you feel more engaged with people who look like you. Remember in my story, when I first started, how my teacher treated me? My elementary school teacher treated me because I looked different. So, that was one reason, or actually the main reason, why kind of she singled me out. Students are subjected to repeated disciplinary actions. Um, to be honest with you, if disciplinary action work, we wouldn't have a student expelled from school. So I want us to think together as educators, as researchers, as people who, seek professional growth. How can we help our learners aside from disciplining them? Getting the learner to reflect on their behavior is one thing, but keep disciplining them just because they make a mistake, that's not the way to go about it. And again, I'll give you an example from my current personal journey. I'm seeking my second doctoral degree. And at some point, one of the teachers, you know, uh, or professors, her approach to learning was if you kind of made one mistake on how you utilize or cite references APA style, 10 points are gone from your grade. The thing is, she won't tell you how to correct it. She would tell you your citation is wrong. So, which citation? I presented like what, 10, 15 citation, and how do I correct it? And then that continued throughout the course. So every single, assignment submitted, there was something wrong with it. The course is 10 modules. It wasn't until module 5 when I said to myself, I'm not going to look at grades. I'm not going to look at what she is doing. I'm going to think about my own goals. So I said to myself, here are my goals for module 6. When I, achieve them, I should be fine. So I don't want us to think about disciplinary actions just like, reporting the students or, expelling them. It has to do with the way we treat them day in and day out. Every single discussion that I had, online discussion, it's an online course. I dreaded it. And it took a lot of mental preparations for me just to come to the, discussion board, post something, and be done with it. By the end of the course, I, did achieve like a very good grade. I amended the relationship with my professor. But was it mentally taxing? Yes, it was. Did I learn from these 5 modules that, you know, uh, I was going through? To be honest with you, not much. But again, when I started, putting these goals and objectives for myself, that helped me a lot. Let's see zero tolerance policies and harsh disciplines, and what do they do to our learners. So the first thing is, they mandate a specific punishment. The thing is, they are proven and found to be ineffective in terms of changing behavior or how they impact academic outcomes. You see, by the end of the day, at least from the point of view of establishing and enacting these policies, the objective is to change behavior. But if the behavior doesn't change and the impact on learning outcomes is negative, the question becomes, why are we doing it? Um, Targeting students, again, who don't look like us, whether it's somehow that these students may, are trying to present their ideas, are trying to present their culture. Maybe they communicate differently than the teacher. All these nuances plays in on how the teacher evaluates the behavior. So the behavior can be different, but it doesn't mean it requires punishment. I want us to think of, our students of color, our LGBTQ communities learner. It's hardly feasible these days to see a class that is homogeneous. You always have learners that don't look like you, that don't come from the same background as you. The other thing that is proven through research, people learn from those who look like them, who understand them, who, you know, um, went through the same learning journey as them. So that's why oftentimes when we try to explain certain concepts that we ourselves did not go through, the learner does not react well, or it doesn't resonate with them. So rather than starting from self, we need to start from learner. The other thing that I'd like to discuss with you is the impact of the presence of police. When I was trying to enroll my son here in the US, we were living in California at the time. I went to the school. I was shocked to see the police car parked in the middle of the school. That scene terrified me because, as an educator, I completely understand and, you know, uh, evaluate that learners cannot learn when you have the police present at school. It won't do anything. If a learner wants to act out, if a learner wants to behave in certain manners, the police will not deter them. If anything, it will get them to think about other ways to challenge them. I moved my son from this particular school. To be honest with you, at the time I was renting, so I managed to get another house to put my son in a different school where I will not be seeing and he will not be seeing a police car in the middle of the school. Learning and the heavy hand of police, they don't go hand in hand. Learning is a journey that empowers the learner to think outside the box, to reflect on their skills, capacities, and capabilities. You cannot do that under the duress of the police. The other thing that I would like to discuss here is the higher arrest rate when we are trying to control misbehavior. Um, the urge to report our learners should be last, not first. And there are many ways, many resources, which I will discuss with you shortly on how to do it. But the first action should not be reporting the student. The first action should be to sit down and have a discussion with them. The discussion, will happen organically if you build rapport with your learner. You know, uh, when I worked at the Defense Language Institute, again, I took time to understand and build rapport with my learners. And later on, I became a learning specialist, someone who specializes in helping students learn and achieve their goals. And the first thing I would do in both capacity was to build trust. If I promise a student something, I would do it no matter what. There were cases or situations where I was really, sick. Nevertheless, I promised the student something. I delivered on my promise, regardless of my, personal illness. It wasn't contagious, so there was that to it. But nevertheless, I made sure whatever promise I made, I would keep. Again, this shift to criminalize student behavior rather than understanding the root causes of the problem is something that we as educator need to think about. There were so many cases with my learners, at least, where they were experiencing domestic violence, where they were experiencing, difficult financial situations. And through discussions, through talks, through open door policies, through connecting with them, together we managed to address it. And the learner graduated at the end of the day. But without these, discussions and understanding the root causes of the problem, none of it would have happened. Um, there is something that I invested in when I, start thinking about this topic. It's called brain-based learning. And based on that concept, you have to create a relaxing environment, an environment where the brain is not experiencing pressure in order for the brain to start engaging and learn. And they say, according to this concept, brain based learning, you can engage both sides of the brain if you create this environment. That concept accompanied me as an educator. And one thing I did with my learners is to have Friday's tea, or I would, make tea, invite teachers and learners to have a cup of tea, to enjoy some homemade pastries, and just to have a discussion about something they'd like. No learning would take place, but an opportunity to build rapport. This way, that harsh, disciplined environment was put aside, and we created something different for the learner to engage. I took into consideration most of my learners, again, were coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. They were traumatized. It was a difficult moment for them. Um, Nevertheless, they were required to sit for 7 to 8 hours in a classroom receiving instruction about a language and a culture that they were in combat with. The other thing that I would also like to bring to your attention, which is absenteeism. Um, Not only in terms of your learners, but also in terms of your teaching team as well. If the environment is so restricted, so harsh, you would see so many teachers calling in sick. You would see so many learners, also calling in sick. And again, that's why we need to come up with ways to make coming to school, coming to class engaging. Whether it's through the way we communicate with our learners, whether it's the way the classroom is arranged, we need to make it conducive to learning. And now we can start thinking about how do we build the relationship between teachers and students. If you have your learner coming to you sharing their struggles, that's a good sign. But the minute you see the learner, kind of shutting the door, they don't want to talk, that's what I call a red flag in the relationship. As the teacher, as the leader, you need to make yourself available. And I know how hard that is because oftentimes, as teachers, we are stretched thin between class preparations, grading, and other educational duties, let alone we need to build rapport with our learners. It can be as simple as asking your learner, how are you feeling? Okay, let's stop the class for a second and see how are we all feeling today. It can be as simple as that. The other thing that I did with my learners and with my teaching team as well, I would have everybody sit in a circle and I will distribute what I called the ultimate personal operation manual. I'll be happy to share it with you if you'd like. It starts with 2 pages. The first page would say, please do these 3 things if you want the maximum collaboration from me. The second page will say, please don't do these things because they will deter me. And then I would fill one, and the learners or the team members would fill these pages, and we will exchange them. So everyone will get to read everyone's manual. Some people and learners, they would put them on their desks, they would put them behind the wall or on the wall where they sit, and they would remind each other of them. If you prefer personal communication, I had a colleague of mine who said, I prefer it when you knock on the door and talk to me, don't email me. That's when you get the maximum collaboration from me. Similarly, one student said, I would prefer, to ask questions one on one. Can you, give me like 10 minutes of your time once or twice a week so as I can come and ask you in person? These little steps, empower you as a leader and empowers your learner also as a kind of a mentee, not someone who would sit down and be instructed how should they learn. Empathy and communication. I'd like us to think about empathy in the most simple way, just to put yourself in the shoes of your learner. If your learner is struggling financially, if your learner is going through a rough patch with their family, if they are experiencing some illness and sickness within their family, how should they act? The other day I received some challenging news. By the end of the day, I discovered it doesn't relate to me, but during that moment, and again, I'm an educator, I have 20 years of experience. I couldn't deal with anything. And I said to myself, thank God I don't have any homework or assignment due for my second doctoral degree. Otherwise, I would have been unable to do anything. So, this is empathy. If you put yourself in your learner's shoes and, imagine, analyze what they are going through, then start the conversation. This way, they would feel heard. It's true, you cannot change what they are going through, but you can empathize. And I want us to understand empathy in contrast with sympathy. So, sympathy, it would be, for example, um, it would be something like, well, thank God it's this, not that. It doesn't matter. If you tell them, thank God, at least you didn't lose, let's say, all of your finances, it won't make them feel better. But if you say, I understand what you are going through, it's a difficult situation, I'm here for you. All these, nuances make them build rapport with you, and you want that rapport. And again, that leads to the positive relationship. I had students, coming to my office apologizing. These are adult learners. Some of them were sergeants and captains, just because they said something in the class that I perceived it to be, not appropriate. And all I did was to stop the class for a second and look at them. If you build that positive relationship with your learners, you will see less and less negative effects. But if you start with punitive approach where you discipline them all the time, then you would see kind of more challenges, a rebellious class, if you'd like. And I have to tell you, it has nothing to do with the age or gender of the learner. It has to do with the environment they are in. One story that I also like to share with you. At the time, I was starting as an associate professor at the law school in Iraq. And at the time, I was the only female faculty member. I was given a class because the 70 students who were in that particular class, uh, laser tagged the teacher to the limit that he left the classroom. And no other teacher wanted to teach that class, so they gave it to me. These students were adult learners, they were managers and directors. They were not teenagers, so to speak, and they were there for a reason. They wanted the degree because, they will use it to seek promotion. Without that law degree, they will not be able to apply for promotion. They were put in an environment where things were dictated down to them, and they wouldn't take it. When students feel respected and valued, so with respect comes from value, you respect someone because you value them, then this way they will start listening to you more, engaging with you more, and learning from you. But once you build, there is something with discipline. Discipline means, or the underlying uh, issue with discipline is there is someone who has no voice and there is someone who has all the authority. That's why, students rebel deep down, because, they have no option but to accept the discipline. And the teacher has all the authority to kind of subject them to that discipline. So it's not equal footing. But when it comes to respect and value, no, you have equal footing. That doesn't mean we cannot discipline our students. I will talk about it, later in the presentation. But there are what I call smart disciplinary action. By the end of the day, you want the student to learn something. There was one student in my class, and again, I'm talking about all military students here. Unfortunately, he dropped the F bomb, if I could say, in the classroom. And again, I immediately stopped the class, gave him my look, and he immediately apologized. And I reminded the class that we are all linguists. So we should be the one who tell others what type of vocabularies we should use and how to use it. The student came to my office as usual and apologized again and promised me not to do it. What I told him is that I won't accept his apology unless he would write 100 times in the target language that he is a linguist and he knows how to choose his vocabulary. And that was his homework for the day. My learner engaged, completed the assignment, submitted it in good quality, and his behavior completely changed. So I don't want you, I'm sharing these stories with you because I don't want you to think like I don't know our classrooms. I have been there, I have been in the trenches with you, I have seen, how students react and how they behave. That relationship building is key to decreasing disciplinary referrals and creating an environment that is conducive to learning. And again, it can start from as little as how are we feeling today, and taking turns to discuss our feelings, designing activities where the learner is encouraged to share how do they feel about the class, about the learning environment, and what motivates them. What is it that motivates them and make them want to learn, want them to participate in a discussion? And again, encouraging empathy training is something that makes your classroom inclusive, welcoming to everyone. By the end of the day, you cannot control who comes to your classroom, but you can control how you treat them. Demonstrating empathy in teaching and learning, starts from, the imagery that we use to engage our learners in a group discussion or peer conversation. I oftentimes start my classroom with images to go through the vocabulary that they need to learn. And then, I would choose the image in such a way to spark the conversation. So the concept is there, but it's not quite obvious. So as I can go around the classroom, ask each one, what do they think? How did that picture make them feel? And then another activity where I would pair them with, someone who's not sitting next to them, and start another conversation. Throughout these activities, I'm listening, I'm checking on them, demonstrating empathy to learning another language and how difficult that it can be. At the same time, providing them with tools and strategies that are level appropriate to help them connect with the language and connect with the culture. And again, if this taught me something, it taught me that we need to be culturally responsive, which means we need to include all of the backgrounds and cultural background of our learners. That doesn't mean that you have to display 190 flags in your classroom to represent different countries around the world. Or you need to show that you are here because you welcome different backgrounds and different cultures. For me personally, mutual respect was key. So, demonstrating that I respect the learner resulted in having the learner respect me as well. And again, it didn't mean that I will not take a corrective action. This is how I'd like to call it, not a disciplinary action. One thing I did at the Defense Language Institute is to use we have a disciplinary form. It's called counseling. What I did was to issue positive counseling. So when I saw something good taking place in the classroom, I made sure to reference it and to specify what it was, how it impact learning, how it impact the classroom environment. At the time, the chief military instructor stood up in front of the entire school and told them these positive counseling change the course of how the learner even behaved within their unit, their military unit. Again, each teacher is a leader. You are a leader in your classroom. And I want you to think of your students as your constituency, not someone who is there to, be instructed. And again, that promotes inclusion. Inclusion simply means that regardless of the background of the learner, you are here to teach them. You are here to give them the tools, the resources they need to grow. It's as simple as that. And, those who look different doesn't mean that, they can't learn or they have to learn in a certain way. We have to kind of differentiate our instructions and, make learning engaging, regardless of the background of our learner. Restorative practices is something I personally believe in. And basically, it's the act of repairing the harm. If something was broken, how are we going to fix it? Rather than pushing for punitive action. Excuse me. It can be as simple as sitting in a circle. And that's why I'd like to do my ultimate operation manual in a circle. Once we sit in equal footing, which is the key here, it sparks the conversation. Sorry, excuse me. It's a dry weather here in Nevada. That leads to reducing suspension. And that's the ultimate goal. You want your class to remain intact. You want the learner to graduate, not to be suspended. Let's take a look at Auckland Unified School District. They applied restorative justice. And I remember back in the day when I worked as the managing academic director for the National Judicial College, we used to conduct classes for the judges on restorative justice so as they can implement it in their courtrooms. And basically, the objective here is to repair the harm, not to punish. These are two different concepts. I want you to think about, what was damaged when the student behave this way, and how are we going to repair it? And I'm going to take you back to my student who used the F word in the class. What was damaged at the time is the perception of language in the mind of his colleagues. What was damaged also was how he presented himself. He's a linguist, whether he's graduating or waiting to take the exam. And that's how I saw them. I told them, I'm a linguist, you are a linguist. We should not be using a language that does not convey meaning. That's number one. So that's the repair we have to make here. And then they saw notable improvement in Black students' engagement with the classroom and in their achievement. So, restorative justice focusing on what was damaged by the student behavior and how to fix it, rather than focusing on punishing the student, makes a huge difference, not only in behavior but in learning outcomes as well. Policy and practice recommendation. Oftentimes, we think of the word policy as something coming from the district or something coming from above. It can be as simple as the standard you apply in your classroom. And I have done this with my students, and I have done this with my, teaching team members. We would sit in like in the teacher's lounge or in the library. I would book it ahead of time, and we would discuss what's acceptable in our relationship. How should we treat each other? So I'm the team lead. How should I treat you? How should you treat me? And then we would come up with the governing principles. I displayed them all over in the teacher's room or lounge, in the offices, everywhere. I abided by them, they abided by them. Similarly, in my classroom, the first day I see students, let's take 5 minutes and discuss what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in the classroom. And I would put it in writing. When I see a violation, I would point out to it. We agreed on this. You gave me your word that this is how you would behave when X happens. Why have you changed? So these practices or these policies can start from the classroom, the way you conduct the classroom, the way you want it to be, all the way to the principal's office and beyond. But it starts from your classroom. Some solutions here for you if you want to explore this topic further, how to build a good rapport with your students, with your diverse students. I highly recommend that you look into our course at the Quarantine Racism. It's offered for $99. It comes with a book. It includes strategies and tools to help you engage with your learners who come from a diverse background. It's basically, authored and completed by educators and for educators. I also want you to connect with the communication of success, and you can ask for a strategic group session where we would discuss issues that are happening in several classrooms. It can include as many as 10 teachers, and the total will come to 150. So the 10 teachers will chip in to get to the 150. There are also grant writing services. So if you want to apply for a grant to help your school with resources, the Communication of Success will be happy to help you. Here are more details about the resource. All you have to do is to go to quarantineracism.com slash question mark refer and equal Mishkat to explore the course more and see what's available for you. Reflective communication is key. It means that you are not reactive, but reflective. You take your time, you build rapport, you create an environment that is conducive to learning. Use inclusive language, a language that acknowledges that students may have experienced trauma. So it's trauma informed language without, singling anybody out, without using a language that is exclusive, leaving someone out. And this way you can help your learners connect with you. Um, Articulate goals and challenges through a structured dialogue and storytelling. When you share stories with your students, they connect with you better. They remember the story. Think about that. We still remember the stories that our grandmas told us. But oftentimes we forget what we just read or saw, on the news or on TV. But we remember stories that were told to us when we were maybe 5 years old, because the impact and the person who told the story meant something to us. Cultural competence is important. It doesn't mean that you have to go and Google every single culture. All it means that you need to acknowledge and accept that there are different cultures and students are coming from these different cultures. Active listening. Active listening is different than listening and nodding. You listen and you nod, and then you cannot wait until someone stops for you to engage and talk. Active listening, meaning asking questions and again asking reflective questions, taking notes, and most importantly, taking action. You listened, you acknowledge that there is an issue. How are you going to act on it? Uh, Bridging the communication gap. I have already shared with you so many stories about, my teaching team, my learners. Bridging this communication gap resulted in improving the results from 6.4% to 9.5% in less than a year. For us, that was really a huge deal and a big improvement. But when you bridge the communication gap, these are, the results that you can expect. My call to action here is to um, think about discipline differently. I want you to think about discipline in a sense that you start the journey to repair the harm with empathy. Whatever harm that has been done, you need to start considering it, thinking about it, reflecting on it from empathy. And think about maybe a community circle that you can do with your learners. View students as people, as in someone who's on an equal footing, a human being that is on an equal footing, and start the conversation from there, not from someone who doesn't know anything about life and your job is to instruct them. Invest in policies. And again, the invest in policy does not mean that you have to wait for the principal, for the district to enact the policy. It can start today from your classroom. And think about systematic change. You know, agreeing on something, on a standard in your classroom, it doesn't mean that you won't need to visit it later. You will need to visit it later. I also want you to know that you are not alone. Quarantine, racism, and the communication of success are in your corner. We are committed to supporting you. We are here to help you, and we want to see you succeed. Thank you again, and I'm here if you have any questions or concerns that you'd like to discuss.